Today, we're gonna dive into a topic that's always hot on the real estate market: renting versus buying. Now, I know when you're trying to make this decision, there's so many factors to consider. You have to think about how long you plan to be in the area, what maintenance you want to deal with, and of course, the cost. It's a big expense. I feel like a lot of millennials like myself are still out there waiting to buy a home because so much has happened with the housing market in the last few years. And honestly, I get it. It's scary to take that risk. But I think it's important to weigh the pros and cons and see what really makes the most sense. I hear people all the time tell me that they're gonna keep renting, and I get it. They usually give me the reason that it's cheaper and it just works for them right now. But I always have to ask, is it really cheaper? We're gonna dive in and look at the facts today and really get to the bottom of this. Let's start with the basics. Renting offers flexibility. You're not tied down to a mortgage or property taxes, and it's probably a little bit easier to pick up and move if you decide that you want to. But that flexibility does come at a cost. Think about it, you're essentially paying off someone else's mortgage while building zero equity for yourself. Not to mention that rent prices fluctuate, and that leaves you at the mercy of your landlord's choices and decisions. But why does it matter if you're building equity? Let's talk about that. A lot of times, your home is the biggest investment that you own. Now, once this investment is paid off, you no longer have a house payment, unlike renting. Housing expenses are typically about half of the average person's budget monthly. So think about how much money you could save later in life if you don't have a housing payment to worry about. And on top of that, having equity in your home also allows you to dip into those funds for projects or paying off debt or emergencies if you ever really need to do that. It's like a savings account. If we take a look at Washtenaw County, the average rent for a 2-bedroom place in this area is roughly $1,800 a month. And that's been on the rise year after year. 2 years ago, rent for the same size place was closer to about $1,600 a month. Now, when you look at monthly expenses, increasing your housing payment by $200 over a couple of years is pretty significant on your pocketbook. And that's just gonna continue. Now, let's compare that to the cost of buying a house instead. So in the same county, the average 2-bedroom home costs about $250,000 to $275,000. And I would argue that you could probably find a 3-bedroom for the same price range. So I did a little calculation to see what payment you would be looking at for that size of house. And even with almost 7% interest rate and just 10% down, your payment would be about $1,800 a month. Now, in some cases, you might even be able to find a mortgage payment that's lower than rental prices. And of course, if you put more money down, or you can get a lower interest rate like we're hoping to see later this year, that's gonna help you with that payment even more. Plus, on top of that, you own a home that you're investing in for your future with each mortgage payment instead of just throwing your money away on rent every month. Now, let's crunch some more numbers. Say that you're paying $1,800 a month right now in rent. If we take that monthly cost and we look at it over the next 5 years, you will have spent $108,000. Now, if you put that same amount towards the mortgage that you have on a house, you could potentially own a piece of property and have more control over your housing. Of course, buying a home isn't without its cons. There are upfront costs like the down payment, your closing costs, and there is ongoing maintenance of a house. Plus, if the housing market does take a dip, you could end up losing some money on your investment. But nothing is without some risk, right? And when you weigh the pros and against the cons, the scale does still often tip in favor of homeownership. Just think about the freedom to personalize your space, stability for your family, and potential tax benefits too. And speaking of tax benefits, let's not overlook the perks of homeownership in terms of tax deductions. Depending on your situation, you can deduct your mortgage interest, your property taxes, and even some home improvement projects. These deductions add up, and then that puts more money back in your pocket come tax season. Now, let's talk about stability. When you rent, you're at the mercy of your landlord's decisions. They could decide to sell their property, they can increase your rent, or they can even terminate your lease sometimes. But when you own a home, you have control over your living situation and your housing expenses so much more than renting. You can put down roots, you can really establish that sense of community with your neighbors and your city, and you can create a space that really feels like yours. I know that was one of my favorite things about becoming a homeowner, was the ability to really personalize my space and make it my own. Now, I know you might still be a little leery. You might be thinking, what about the housing market crash in 2008? What if that happens again? There was a lot of concern about that over the last few years. And yeah, it was a tough time for a lot of homeowners, but I think it's important to remember that the market has since recovered from that. A lot of things have changed in the lending world where that was an issue, and historically, real estate has proven to be a really strong long-term investment. So if you're still unsure whether renting or buying is right for you, then I think the smart idea is to reach out to a trusted financial advisor and talk with a realtor like me about your home ownership goals. Each person's situation is different, so we'll be able to personalize a plan based on your specific needs and circumstances. There just isn't a one-size-fits-all answer when it comes to real estate, unfortunately. So, is buying a home cheaper than renting? In many cases, I would still say yes, but ultimately, it really depends on your individual circumstances and your long-term goals. Before you make any decisions, be sure to do your homework, crunch some numbers, and consider sitting down with a realtor like myself for some advice. And if you found this video helpful, be sure to like and subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss out on other videos that are gonna give you more real estate tips and tricks. And if you have a great story about becoming a homeowner that you'd like to share, I would love to hear it in the comments below. As much as I can share my experience of becoming a homeowner and being in real estate, I think it's great to get multiple opinions, and seeing your experience just might help someone else on their homeownership journey.